Okay, so before 1960, apparently this entire crime had been set up. This is news to me. Okay, so in 1958 and 59, Harold was in prison, and I don't know what crime he did, but he was in prison, and his inmates chose him to do this crime. This could be so outlandish, I know, but just bear with me, okay? So they chose Harold to do this crime because he knew the area, the LaSalle County area, and he had a job to do with his friends. Alice swears that her brother did this crime. She very emotional. She literally broke down in tears telling me this entire interview, and I'm going to incorporate this into the final documentary that I'm making. But she went on to explain that she knew that Harold had friends, but she didn't have any names of who he was involved with. And the deal was that all the women were to die. And apparently it was all to do, and I'm sure you've heard rumor that the husbands hired a bounty hunter to have them killed. Except for Mrs. O'Edding's husband. He did not want this to happen, but regardless, all three of the women had to die. Now, I know there was 4 initially planned to set out from Starved Rock, but I guess it was only the 3. She never spoke about the 4th one at all. Let's see, what else did she say? So, when Harold got released from prison in 1959, he then orchestrated this entire operation. Let's see. Okay, so, and then she informs me that the women were not killed inside of the canyon. And I don't know if you've heard about these rumors of aliens killing the women. There's so many stories that I've heard, but one of the more common ones that Alice, this is the one she says happened, that the women were taken from the canyon to Harold's house, and I'm not sure where he lived at the time, but apparently he beat them and bludgeoned them to death, and then using a car, they took the bodies in the car and lowered a car down into the base of the canyon at St. Louis Canyon, and then dragged the bodies up into the cave. That's how she says this whole operation went down. And I've heard about the whole lowering the car into the canyon and all that. That's a very common thing amongst people who are against, or for Chester, I mean. Have you heard anything about the car, just out of curiosity?
I have not, honestly. It's one of those things where it's like, I've heard all sorts of stories about it, and one of the things that Steve or Ray was talking about was that one of them said that, the one that committed the murders had also committed, like, the Schuster sisters murders, and it's like, or the Schuster-Peterson murders.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I really respect your ability to be able to kind of, it's not that you're, like, siphoning that out, you're letting it be instead of giving an opinion. So that's tough. I have to tell you, I'm too much of an opinionated person to keep my mouth shut. So more power to you for being a director and able to do that.
Yeah, well, you know what, I was, in the moment, I literally was just asking her all sorts of questions in terms of, well, why do you think he did that and this, and just not even bringing up, it's about gearing the conversation toward what you've read from Steve Stout's book, and gearing that information to pose questions that are in opposition to what she's saying. So that was fun, but at the same time, you keep an open mind, and you just want to tell both sides of the story, because I don't want to, this was an objective point of view for me. What else did she say? Let's see. She wouldn't point out who else she thought did this. Oh yeah, so she said, she goes, did Harold have help? And she said, yes, he did. And I said, can you point out who you might think have, or who you know or might have known to do this? And she said, no, I don't want to be sued, she says. And she sees, okay, now this is side stuff, I guess. She sees Chester twice a year. They talk about what he reads. She says that he's very educated. And when I interviewed Steve Stout, did you guys get a chance to interview Steve yet? Or did you guys just talk personally?
I've spoken to Steve,
okay.
but I have not gotten to interview him yet. We haven't been able to connect on a date yet, and I think he's kind of busy.
Cool.
But yeah, I'll put that together at some point, just because I'm so fascinated by the whole thing. I mean, I want to talk to anybody I possibly can about it. So.
Oh yeah, Steve knows everything as much as Ray does, and I'm like way off, just doing my film thing, you know. But no, it's but when I spoke to Steve, he specifically made mention of when he interviewed Chester. He made a point to tell me in the interview. He said he was a very educated and smart man, but what Steve said is he was a smart man for what I expected him to be. And he's had all this time, and according to Alice and everyone that I've spoken to, that Chester just reads all the time. They talk about the ocean. They talk about the places that he wants to go when he gets out. So, you know, he's a very educated guy, and he's had a lot of time to think about everything that happened in this case, whether it was true or not. He's had a lot of time to think about it. So he had an answer for Steve in every single question he asked him. I'll let you get into that with Steve when you guys set the date. But, yeah, he had an answer for everything, it seems like. And when I got my letter from him, the letters, he had it all written out specifically. Mind you, it was circular pattern of thought, but he had it all down. You know, Julie, my girlfriend here, didn't he contradict himself a few times in the letters as well? Right. Right. You guys heard all that, right? I was open.
No, I didn't catch it, actually. Sorry. I heard it.
I'm so sorry, man.
It's okay.
But basically, he's learned to disassociate himself, it seems like, through the writing alone from the actual case. He believes that what he did, it fits whatever his narrative is, but he doesn't, like, look at the entire picture. Am I wording that correctly from what you said, Julie? Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically what I have found. A few things that I actually came across in my research here. The evidence that we found at the crime scene, let's see. When Harlan Warren, I don't know if you want to go into this at all, but
feel free.
But Harlan Warren, during the time when all the evidence and nothing was happening, and he just decided, I'm going to bring all the evidence into my room, and he sat it down there, and I know that you've already spoken to Ray about all this. The only foreign object from the scene of the crime was the twine. Let me talk about the twine here in a second. Talk about the actual, let's see, the camera. This is irrelevant information about how that camera was an Argus C3 and about how the photos, they were proven to have been taken at like 2:23 or something like that. So they estimated it was like 2:45 when the women got to the canyon or were murdered. And also from the autopsy of the food in their stomach. But the camera, when they snapped the photo, I forgot who had the photos, the camera, I think it was Oedian, but when she wound the camera, she didn't quite wind the camera itself, and when that happens, images would overlap one another, And when they took it to be examined, a tree over a tree made it look like it was another individual in the frame, and that got out and went on the news media and everything. Did you guys talk about this in another interview at all?
It's funny. I don't think I talked about it. I've heard Steve talk about it before, but I don't think we got into that there was the idea that they actually took a picture of their would-be killer.
Right. Well, it's all irrelevant because it was the news media making something out of nothing. And
yeah, we talked about them doing that all over
exactly.
the place. Every little thing was them.
Everything.
I mean, it's just, like I said, 2 weeks ago, it's just like now. Any little thing that comes out with anything, they'll blow it up. The media, you can't. Like in 1960, they believed everything, but now nobody would believe anything they say.
Oh, that's another thing. Talking about, I'm going to come back to this, but police brutality, a lot of the times on the news media, you see police, abusing someone, but what they don't show you is the first lead up to it about how that subject or whatever was harassing the cop, and then you see the actions they had to take. That's the part that gets on the news media. It's like they totally neglect the fact of how it started. And they make police out to be the bad guys a lot of the time. That's not true all the time, but that's how the media runs.
Well, that gets ratings. And I always say that people that run should get at least a little bit of an ass whipping. They're just saying, teach them not to run.
There you go. Let's see here. So the twine that they found. Oh, let me go back. Oh, the wood. That chunk of wood that was frozen solid, they actually took to be examined, and it went to Dr. Kuchla up in Madison, Wisconsin, and he revealed to everyone that the wood had been exposed to fire 5 years ago. So I'm pretty sure it was Harlan Warren that actually took that bit of evidence, and he spoke to a custodian that had been there for quite a while, and the custodian told him that there was, in fact, a fire that occurred above the falls up above St. Louis Canyon. And what would have happened was that driftwood came down the falls, landed where the actual murders happened, and that's how the frozen tree branch came to be. And that's totally irrelevant information, too, but it's interesting to see the amount of detail that the detectives had to go through to figure out each and every piece of evidence that was brought to them. In fact, I think there were 2,200 leads to this entire case, 2,200 leads. So that was just one of them. Let's see, what else was there? The jacket that they took from Chester, I'm just jumping around all over little bits and pieces of information.
It's okay. One thing you talked about was the branch, and I hadn't even really discussed that. One thing before you get into this next thing, I was going to ask you, do you know where the branch is now? Because as of about 7 years ago, I think it was with one of the detectives' families, hardened and on their mantle. It was really weird. I don't know.
Oh, my God. Geez, you think if that would be preserved, maybe we get some better technology and be able to tell the blood, It's like, come on. They didn't have that technology back then, but who knows? That's news to me. I don't know what happened to the branch. So, let's see. In terms of the jacket that the detectives asked Chester for after his, I think it was after his polygraph test, I think it was in Chicago with John Reed. What was it? After that, they collected his jacket, and they examined it, and they found that there was blood pattern. The blood pattern had been splattered in every direction, which correlated to if he had done the murders that specific crime, But I think his reasoning, Chester said, was that his wife had a chicken, and when she butchered the chicken or something like that, blood got on his jacket. But by no means would it be splattered in every single direction on his jacket. That's just another little tidbit there.